flown to warmer places. The butterflies had disappeared entirely. Even the bees were scarce. The grasshopper's audience, and his world, was shrinking. Determined to shake off the unease, he hopped toward a patch where food had once been plentiful. He searched carefully, moving aside dry leaves and brittle stems. After a long while, he found only a few scraps. "This is strange," he muttered, turning the tiny pieces over in his hands. "There used to be so much." A quiet realization began to form, but he resisted it, pushing the thought aside. Across the meadow, the ants were still working, but now with intense urgency. Their lines were longer, their pace quicker. Some carried loads larger than before, straining with effort but never stopping. The grasshopper approached them again, this time without laughter. "Is it really that close?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "Is winter almost here?" The ant looked at him, not unkindly, but with a seriousness that carried weight. "Closer than yesterday," he said. "And tomorrow, it will be closer still." His words were simple, but they landed heavily. For a moment, the grasshopper considered asking for help, perhaps even joining their work. But pride held him back. He straightened himself and forced a small smile. "I'll manage," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure. That evening, the wind grew stronger than ever before, sweeping across the meadow with a sharp edge. The grasshopper clung to a blade of grass as it bent under the force. For the first time, fear settled clearly in his heart. Autumn arrived in full. The meadow no longer shimmered with life but stood quiet and fading. The once soft grass had turned brittle underfoot, and every step the grasshopper took produced a faint, dry crackle. The sky stretched wide and pale above him, often hidden behind drifting gray clouds. The sun appeared only briefly each day, offering little warmth. The grasshopper felt its absence more with each passing morning. Food had become scarce. Where there had once been abundance, there were now only remnants, tiny seeds hidden beneath layers of fallen leaves. The grasshopper searched tirelessly, but his efforts yielded little. His movements grew slower. The energy that once fueled his joyful leaps was fading, replaced by a constant, gnawing hunger. Even holding his violin felt like a burden now. One afternoon, he tried to play again, hoping to lift his spirits. But the music that emerged was weak and uncertain. The notes faltered, and before long, he lowered the instrument, unable to continue. In the distance, the ants made their final trips. Their lines were smaller now, their work nearly complete. One by one, they disappeared into their underground home, sealing the entrance behind them. The grasshopper watched them from afar, a deep sense of regret settling within him. He remembered every warning, every moment he had laughed instead of listening. "I should have started sooner," he whispered to himself. The words felt heavy, filled with truth he could no longer deny. But now, the meadow offered no second chances. That night, the first frost crept across the ground. A thin layer of white coated the grass, sparkling faintly under the pale moonlight. The cold was sharp and unforgiving. Curled beneath what little shelter he could find, the grasshopper trembled. Hunger and cold pressed in on him from all sides. And for the first time, he fully understood the cost of his carelessness. Winter arrived without mercy. Snow fell steadily through the night, covering the meadow in a thick, endless blanket of white. By morning, the world the grasshopper once knew had vanished completely. The tall grasses that once swayed in the breeze were now buried beneath snowdrifts. The colorful flowers were gone, and the familiar paths had disappeared. Everything looked the same, cold, silent, and unforgiving. The grasshopper struggled to move. Each step through the snow drained his remaining strength. His legs, once powerful and quick, now felt weak and unsteady beneath him. Hunger gnawed at him constantly. It was no longer a distant discomfort but a sharp, urgent pain. He searched desperately, digging through the snow in hopes of finding anything to eat, but there was nothing. His violin hung silently at his side. He had not played it in days. The thought of music felt distant now, almost meaningless in the face of his suffering. A cold wind swept across the frozen meadow, cutting through him like a blade. The grasshopper shivered violently, his body unable to keep itself warm. With every passing hour, his strength faded further. He paused often, forced to rest, though rest brought no comfort, only the creeping cold that threatened to overtake him. In his weakness, memories returned to him, warm summer days, laughter, music, and the ant's steady warnings. Each memory now carried a sharp edge of regret. "I should have listened," he said aloud, his voice barely more than a whisper against the wind. The words were carried away, unheard by anyone but himself. At last, with no other choice left, the grasshopper turned toward the only place he could think of, the ant's home. With what little strength remained,